If Mr. Trump adds these 40 seconds to his rallies and speeches, he may stop the computer rigging that's meant for him and save his election to the presidency. This is Jim Condit Jr., the founder of WatchTheVoteUSA.com. We're the ones that caught the vote fraud against Pat Buchanan in 1996 in Iowa and forced the Iowa GOP to change the winner in 2012 in the Iowa Caucus. Go to openlettertodonaldtrump.com. That's openlettertodonaldtrump.com to find the documentation of these two astounding accomplishments of Watch the Vote USA at the menu tab marked Open Letter. You'll find the documentation, including 2 CNN videos, in the first few paragraphs of that Open Letter. There's only one issue left in this election. Trump has already won by a landslide in every state, if we can get a fair count, but the Election Night Gatekeepers are planning to steal it from them if they can make it believable. There's only one way that Trump can make it impossible for them to do this without half or maybe 80% of the country feeling they stole it by computer fraud, and that's to put the Election Night Gatekeepers, the 5 TV networks, and their 7 co-conspirators on the defensive. So I'm going to right now go into the what Mr. Trump must do, 40 seconds to victory, and his rally speeches and even interviews, and then we're going to come back and give you the solid reasons why it is necessary, and it's the only issue really left in the campaign, why it's necessary for Trump to do this. He alone can bring this to the public floor, and he has to disregard the terrible advice he will get from Kellyanne Conway and everyone else who's trying to worship at the altar of the networks and treat them as if they're like almost godlike in their analysis, instead of treating them like the election divisions, like the criminals that they are. So here's the 40 seconds to victory, what Mr. Trump must do if he wants to ensure that he is not computer frauded in this election.
In every speech, you must tell the public, and I'm going to do like you're talking. Quote, folks, I'm worried about the November election being computer rigged against me. Computer rigged against me. You know, where they take your Trump votes and switch them to Hillary votes inside the computer. We can't accept this type of black box voting anymore. Our country's entire future is at stake. Then you would hold up a DVD of Hacking Democracy before your crowds. Hacking Democracy is the HBO documentary that explains how the computer rigging is happening and how it works. So then while you're holding up the DVD of Hacking Democracy, you would then continue. Everybody watch the HBO documentary, Hacking Democracy. The HBO documentary, Hacking Democracy. And also Google Election Night Gatekeepers. ElectionNightGatekeepers.com. We can't let them steal this presidential election from us, folks. End quote.
So let me say what I'm suggesting you say at every speech and on interviews without any insertions from me. Folks, I'm afraid they're going to computer rig the November election against me. You know, take your Trump votes and switch them inside the computer to Hillary Clinton votes. We can't accept this black box voting anymore. The whole future of the country is at stake. Then holding up the DVD. Everyone get HBO's documentary Hacking Democracy and watch it. That's HBO's Hacking Democracy documentary and watch it, and Google ElectionNightGatekeepers.com. That's ElectionNightGatekeepers.com. Folks, we can't let them steal it from us. Now that took about 40 seconds, and if you don't say this in every speech, you're fighting not Hillary Clinton, you're fighting the 5 TV networks who are pounding down upon you every day, and you're fighting the election division, not the anchors, Hannity, O'Reilly, Chris Matthews. You're fighting the election divisions of these 5 TV networks. You must slam them to the mat, expose them, and that's the way you can do it, especially holding up HBO's documentary, Hacking Democracy with Bev Harris, which nobody can call conspiracy theory, I don't think. Even if they did, it shouldn't matter. But how are they going to call HBO a conspiracy theory operation?
That's what you must say starting now in every speech. If you don't do this, you will regret it for the rest of your life, because they will steal this presidential election from you. And anybody that says not to do this, who maybe wants to remain friends with the 5 TV networks, you've got to get rid of them. You have to take on the 5 TV networks. That's who you're fighting, not Hillary. They're nitpicking at everything you do all day and treating that walking criminal, treating the evil that lives in Hillary Clinton's pantsuit as if they're a shoe-in. And when you hold up, again, the HBO DVD Hacking Democracy, that will put all the election night gatekeepers on the run. And at election night gatekeepers, they can find out the public can find out who has been stealing their country since 1988. The Trump campaign should also file a noisy lawsuit against
every Secretary of State
in the United States and the counties in that state to force an open count on Election Day. They still have time to do it.
That is, 99% of the county boards of elections still have time to count the ballots right, like we did in the United States from 1792 to 1972, and like they still do in 5 counties in New Hampshire. That is, paper ballots counted in public by hand by neighborhood people with all factions watching before the ballots leave the public site. Instead of what they're intending to do again, as they've done in every year since 1988 in 99% of our counties, snatching the ballots from the people at closing time and then using police guard to prevent any citizens from seeing the ballots while 3 mysterious mega companies count 95% or so of our ballots on secret software that these 3 private companies own, and which the county boards of election officials, which hired them, agree not to look at by contract. And this was confirmed by Ohio's Secretary of State John Husted on tape in a public meeting in Cincinnati, Ohio on September 17th, 2012, which audio we've made into its own YouTube video entitled, "Our Election Officials Do What?" The reason you don't know the names of these 3 mega companies that count about 95% of our nation's ballots in secret, or heard about how they operate, is because the treasonous election divisions of the big 5 TV networks and related big media have never told you about them, let alone opposed them or investigated this communistic type of concentration of power. Nor have the big TV networks ever asked how it can be that 99% of our counties have hired one of these only 3 big mega vendors, or one of their more recent small front companies, to, quote, count, unquote, all our ballots in secret on election night. These 3 sinister companies are ES&S, which stands for Election Systems and Software, Hart InterCivic, and Dominion, which recently bought Diebold, whose name had become too stinky. By the way, it's the Nation magazine article by Ronnie Duggar in 2004, which is linked at electionnightgatekeepers.com, that revealed that these handful of mega companies counted at that time 96% of the election night vote in the USA. And since the Republicans and Democrats control all 3,149 counties in the United States and all 50 offices of the 50 Secretaries of State, the Republican National Committee and the Democratic National Committee become 9 and 10 of the election night gatekeepers. The first 5 are the 5 big networks, then the 3 mega vendors, that's 8. 9 and 10 are the RNC and the DNC. Why do the RNC and the DNC make the list of the election night gatekeepers? Because they've both green-lighted all their state and local election officials to hire these 3 mega vendors and sign the absurd contracts that say the election officials cannot look at the software which tell the computers what to do on election night. What could be more absurd? But there's more. Another company you've never heard of, thanks to the 5 big TV networks and related big media, is National Election Poll, or NEP. This company used to be called Voter News Service. That's Voter News Service until 2004. Same company, change of name. It's National Election Poll. This company does all the unscientific exit polls on Election Day that are announced by the 5 big TV networks and AP Wire as the polls close. And believe it or not, this company, unknown to the public, is owned by ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, Fox, and AP Wire. So AP Wire and National Election Poll are 11 and 12 of the 12 election night gatekeepers. But it gets worse. The big TV network competition to call winners and losers on election night is a hoax, has always been a hoax since at least as far back as 1988, and the election division of the 5 big TV networks knows it's a hoax, because all 5 big TV networks get the exact same exit poll information at the exact same time from this exact same company, National Election Poll, a company which they jointly own. Why does the American people not know about this? Because the 5 big TV networks are hiding their own criminal treason in helping rig these elections and helping to steal our national identity. And the fake competition to call winners and losers is meant to get you caught up in the election night drama and make you think that everything happening and being reported is real. Let's analyze the public opinion polls you're hearing so much about now, and the exit polls, and the computer count published on election night. All 3 of these are black boxes that the public and election officials are not allowed to look into. We're in a round robin of deception orchestrated by the 5 TV networks and the other election night gatekeepers. Let's think about the polls for a minute. So against what we see with our own eyes in this 2016 election. We see online polls, for instance, after the first debate, and every other debate that's been done, where Trump is winning by massive landslides. This is where sometimes over 100,000, sometimes over 1 million people go straight to their computers online and participate. And Clinton will be defeated in these polls 70% to 30%, 80% to 20%. Yet the networks want you to believe that against all of that, where real people are voting on the online polls, and where you can only vote once on each computer, by the way, in all the big ones, they want you to believe that their polls, like CNN's poll of 500 people, we don't know who these 500 people are. Are they blue-collar Democrats? A liberal Democrat, we have no idea who they're even polling or what neighborhoods they're polling, and they'll come out and call their 500-person poll a scientific poll when we don't even know if they take them, but they do probably have people make the calls. But if they want to, they can just falsify the results when they announce the results. They have Hillary Clinton winning 62% to 27% over Trump after the first big debate. A total hoax. These networks are the biggest liars in human history, and most of you know that, so quit believing their polls. Demand that they explain how these polls can possibly be scientific. That isn't even established as far as I'm concerned. So these are black box polls that we're looking into. And then we look at the crowds against the polls. Here's Trump getting 5 to 25,000 people everywhere he goes. Hillary can't even get 2 to 400 people most of the time, even with rock stars like Bon Jovi or Bernie Sanders appearing with her. But we're not supposed to believe our lying eyes. We're supposed to believe the liars at these 5 big TV networks. And remember, the entire future of the world's at stake. They have every motive for their bosses to rig these polls that they're constantly telling us are so scientific. Next, the next black box is the unscientific exit polls released on Election Day. These, again, are done exclusively, the ones that are reported, are done exclusively by National Election Poll, the company that the 5 TV networks and AP Wire jointly own. We've been caught up with 2 of these exit polls in the last 20 years, very hard to find. And the people taking them, hired by then Voter News Service, said only 1 out of 15 people will talk to them, and they skipped the 2-hour rush hour in the morning and the 2-hour rush hour at night where they're calling in the results. So how are these scientific at all? If there's, people don't have time to talk to them, they're busy, they got to take mom to the doctor, pick up the kids at school, get to work. How are these scientific? And then when they get caught falsifying exit polls, like Pat Buchanan versus President Bush in 1992, where the exit polls show, even their exit polls showed Buchanan about defeating President Bush, yet by the time the night was over, Buchanan had dropped from a tie to 36%, 49 to 36 by the end of the night. Or recently in Arizona, where they got caught with Bernie Sanders doing way better in the exit polls and Hillary Clinton wins the computer count. In both cases, Voter News Service, that's now become National Election Poll, 24 years apart. In both cases, their officials said, well, the Buchanan people in 92 and the Sanders people in 2016 were more willing to talk to us. That's why the exit polls didn't reflect what the computer count eventually showed. Well, if you're depending on who's willing to talk to you, how is that a scientific exit poll? They're not scientific. They're a black box poll controlled by these 12 election night gatekeepers, okay? And they are using them and can falsify them to prepare you for the easily rigged computer count that's coming up. And then, of course, there's the election night, totally secret computer count in 99% of the country. And we've already explained how that can be easily rigged to show anything that they think they can get away with. In this case, they're trying to decide if they think they can make Hillary Clinton the, quote, computer winner, and if people accept that when Hillary is walking up to take the oath of office in 2017, January 20th. I don't think Americans will accept it. As Roger Stone has said, Trump's longtime friend, people are not going to accept it. A few people, very intelligent researchers, have said to me that if the landslide is big enough, these three megacorporations cannot fix the election, right? That is wrong. Since the big three vendors, ES&S, Hart, and Dominion, are counting the election on software that they own and that no one else is allowed to see, these three companies could collude to make Trump win 99% to 1% over Hillary, or Hillary to win 99% to 1% over Trump. They have the power to do this thanks to our brain-dead or bought-off election officials. But whatever they do must be believable. That's why the only power Donald Trump and his supporters now have for the 2016 presidential election is to expose the power that these election vendor companies have, and that the 5 big TV networks are protecting them from public view. Then the public will finally be aware of what is happening and will be watching the 5 big TV networks with a skeptical, angry eye on election night by the tens of millions of people. And this public awareness may force the election night gatekeepers to let the real results stand, i.e., a victory for Trump in November. Again, with a totally honest count, Trump would win by a landslide in all 50 states because the interesting, funny, unpredictable celebrity always beats the dud. But to repeat, only Donald Trump has the power to put the election night gatekeepers on the defensive by bringing the 40 seconds up we've suggested earlier in this video at all of his rallies, and thereby put the computer vote scam issue front and center before the American people. Another mistake I hear is people talk as if it's who can buy off these election vendors, these big three of election vendors. Trump just today on September 29th started with his theme of follow the money on Hillary Clinton. Well, let's follow the money on these big election vendors and the big TV networks. That goes to the international banks that issue money, such as the Federal Reserve Board, which is our national so-called bank, the Goldman Sachs, the International Monetary Fund. These people have all the money they want. They have been given the power by governments to print the money. So it's not about money or somebody buying somebody off. It is about power. If the ruling elite wants Hillary Clinton and they think they can get away with it, they will put in Hillary Clinton. And if they want somebody else, they'll put in somebody else if they think they can get away with it. So this is not about money or somebody buying off a county election official. This is about power, and nobody's going to be allowed to buy off these three mega companies that are fronting for the big banks that issue the money and are lusting for world tyrannical type power. As an aside, you'll notice that no one on the big TV networks or on big talk radio is allowed to tell you any of this about the 12 election night gatekeepers. Big media personalities never challenge the premise of these big media sanctioned polls, treating them as if the angels brought them down from heaven, instead of treating them like the weaponized propaganda they are, put out by the greatest deceivers in human history to deceive and manipulate the American people and the world. A sharp lawyer near Washington, D.C. asked me to emphasize these 3 points, and he's right. 1, we must be able to publicly verify the vote count on election night. 3 U.S. Supreme Court decisions demand this, but it has not been happening since 1988, the era of secret computer accounts, the era of the Bushes and Clintons. These 3 Supreme Court decisions and what they say are on a special menu tab at electionnightgatekeepers.com. The Supreme Court in 3 Supreme Court decisions have ruled clearly and emphatically that your right to vote consists of 2 parts. 1, the right to cast a ballot, i.e. put a paper ballot in a ballot box, and 2, the right to know that your vote was counted accurately. We still are allowed to cast a ballot, but we have no idea if our ballot is being counted accurately or not on these mysterious, secret, computerized election programs. In fact, you will see that these Supreme Court decisions make secret computer counts illegal, precisely because no one can see what's happening inside the election computer. In one of these Supreme Court decisions, Westbury versus Sanders in 1964, from the Civil Rights era, Justice Hugo Black wrote the following, quote, "No right is more precious in a free country than that of having a voice in the election of those who make the laws under which, as good citizens, we must live. Other rights, even the most basic, are illusory if the right to vote is undermined," unquote. Especially if it's undermined in the 2016 election to change Trump votes inside the computers to Hillary votes. Number 2, second point. Everyone must understand that in 99% of the 3,141 counties in the USA, the police have been deceived into barring citizens from hand counting the ballots on election night before the ballots leave the public site, thereby protecting and enabling the treasonous election night gatekeepers to rig the vote counting software if they wish, and thus rig the presidential election and other key elections. In other words, in 2016, they'll take Trump votes and switch them to Hillary votes inside the secret computer programs to the extent they think they can get away with it. If anyone requests a recount, the paper ballots are brought out around 21 days later. Plenty of time to switch the ballots if a ruthless oligarchy is in the process of stealing the city, the county, the state, the nation, and the world. Don't believe me on this incredible point. If you're outside of New Hampshire, or even if you're in 5 of the bigger counties in New Hampshire, call your own county board of elections or county supervisors and ask them when you and other citizens are allowed to hand count, to check the paper ballots on election night before the ballots are snatched from public sight. You will find there is no provision for this, and that anyone who tries to get at any real paper ballots on election night will be arrested by the police, just like we're living in a communist country or in a tin horn dictatorship. Incredible, but true. Number 3, 99% of the election officials in 99% of our U.S. counties sign a contract with the election vendors that they hire that they are not allowed to inspect the vendor's software, which tells the election computer what to do on election night. I've already covered this, but it must be emphasized. It's so incredible. For instance, in Hamilton County, Ohio, Cincinnati, where I live, the election officials signed such a contract with the mega vendor Hart InterCivic. In Siskiyou County, that's Siskyu County, California, just this month, one of our excellent Watch the Vote USA investigators found not only does that county sign a contract that they can't look at the software, but that part of the contract with ES&S is confidential from the public. Professor Douglas W. Jones of Iowa University warned in August 2007 on WHO radio on the Jan Michelson show that the big election vendors were trying then to get contracts with the local boards of election that would be kept confidential from the public. Now here's how election night works. Since at least as far back as 1988 and even in many places before then, the local election officials in 3,100 plus counties, prodded by the RNC and the DNC, the Republican National Committee and the Democratic National Committee, have hired basically one of three of these large computer election vendors, or one of their more recent pop-up front companies, which exists to throw smoke in your eyes, for they all operate on the same secretive and anti-transparency principles. I believe that they are one company run by the dark side of the intelligence agencies. Not the entire intelligence agencies, but the dark side of them. There's always a good side and a dark side to most of these entities. Then, effectively behind police guard, these three big vendors, quote, count, unquote, all the votes in 99% of the counties on election night on secret software which the election officials, again, have signed a contract not to look at. The three big vendors and or the local election officials then report the easily rigged computer results in one way or another to National Election Poll or one of its surrogates. And then that company that's owned by the five big TV networks and AP Wire, NEP, then in turn gives the results to their owners, the five big TV networks and AP Wire, which in turn announce these black box voting results to the public. These are totally unverified results on easily rigged computers. Until now, almost everyone in the United States has taken these results on blind faith. But with the internet and social media, this has already changed. It had a sea change here. Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson are surely spinning in their graves. The Founding Fathers understood what we've somehow forgotten. Never let anyone take your ballots out of public sight before the ballots are hand-counted by human beings. For more information on any of these subjects and documentation, go to electionnightgatekeepers.com and or openlettertodonaldtrump.com. Be sure also to click the video tab where I have other shocking but necessary videos up. One is about how we can all best protect Trump from assassination and who would be doing the assassination. The second video deals with how Trump could go down truly as one of the greatest leaders in the history of the world by being the first leader in the modern age to finally bring the issuing of the nation's money up to date in this age of computers and technology, in this age of plenty. But seek out the video called This Age of Plenty - the video. And a third video is necessary on how Trump may need to use the precinct system if he becomes president in order to change the Republican Party from top to bottom. The precinct leaders can change the local party leaders. The local party leaders can change the state and national party leaderships, who in turn can change the Congress. Replacing Bill Kristol's people and Paul Ryan's people and Mitch McConnell's people and John Kasich's people in the Republican Party precinct system with Trump people. Then you can have a pro-Trump agenda Congress by 2018 if the current Congress resists the Make America Great Again agenda. And then the new Congress and the new president can implement the agenda that Mr. Trump has articulated in his many speeches. Back to the election night gatekeepers and how to stop them from computer rigging the 2016 presidential election against Trump. Now that the table is set, this computer vote scam issue and the election night gatekeepers are the only issue that matters in the last weeks of the 2016 presidential election. Why do you think NBC's Lester Holt asked the last question at the first debate to Trump, will you accept the election results? Remember that? Lester Holt was told to ask this by his bosses at the big TV networks because they, the bosses, are very nervous. They want to intimidate Trump and his supporters from telling the American people about their nefarious election-related activities. Why do you think they're so worried? Because once the everyday American hears about how the election night gatekeepers are in position to totally rig presidential elections, almost all of the American people will believe it. It'll become clear why our country has been going so bad over the last 24 years. You already have massive awareness amongst Ron Paul supporters, Bernie Sanders supporters, and Donald Trump supporters. But only Mr. Trump can put the computer rigging issue where it needs to be, at the center of the rest of the 2016 presidential campaign, especially in the last days before the election. Here I need to say this because the whole future of the country is at stake. I've been fighting this computerized vote scam battle since 1979. And I'm only going to say this because of the fact that the entire future of the country is at stake. I am the foremost authority in the world on this subject, the subject I'm addressing here, about how to finally put the 5 big TV networks and the election night gatekeepers on the defensive where they belong. I know more about what Donald Trump needs to do right now to save his election to the presidency than all of the Trump advisors put together, because most, if not all of them, have not been studying this issue at all, and most of them are living in a brainwashed world where they think that the current leadership of the 5 big TV networks and their crooked election divisions must be kowtowed to and catered to instead of exposed and dethroned as the enemies of the American people and of honest elections, which they are. In fact, I would expect all of them, all of the advisors, to try to stop Donald Trump from putting these 40 seconds about the dangers of the presidential election being computer rigged in his rally speeches. Trump will have to overrule them. Top priority for me and for you. Get this video, 40 Seconds to Victory for Trump, to Donald Trump and his children ASAP. Tweet him at @RealDonaldTrump for Twitter, or at his Facebook page. Or if you know any of the Trumps, make sure they sit down and watch this video. Ever since the 5 big TV networks put out those grossly lying polls after the freak show called the Democratic Convention that Hillary was winning everywhere, polls they're still pushing, I felt that Mr. Trump and his people were not happy warriors anymore, that they did not have a spring in their step anymore. That's because they are believing these lying big network-promoted public opinion polls, or at least feel helplessly trapped by these polls. And the Trump campaign is trapped, and we the American people are trapped, because the 5 big TV networks control what public opinion polls they announce, however false. They control what exit polls they announce on Election Day, however false. And they protect the 3 big computer election vendors that give them the easily rigged computer election results, which the 5 big TV networks and AP Wire announce to the public on election night, however false. And as we've explained, there are no real checks and balances on election night or ever. By spotlighting what these election night gatekeepers have been treasonously doing since at least as far back as 1988, the era of the Clintons and the Bushes, Donald Trump can take control of the situation again right now. Tens of millions of Americans will stand up and cheer with him and for him if he brings forth this issue. And it's a winning issue. People already know something is wrong. And we may altogether be able, behind Mr. Trump, to prevent the 5 big TV networks and the other 7 election night gatekeepers from daring to computer rig the 2016 presidential election against Trump and computer rig it for the walking felon, Hillary Clinton.
Millions of Americans have fought, been wounded, bled, and died to ensure our right to an honest vote count. We dare not allow the treasonous and subversive election night gatekeepers to continue to spit on their sacrifice. Thanks for listening, and everyone into the battle.